Growing food in a freezing climate was not merely difficult. It was a constant fight for survival, where a single mistake could lead to an empty storage room when winter arrived. Yet medieval farmers were far from helpless. They possessed a wealth of methods, strategies, and clever tricks, beginning with preparations that made all the difference before the first frost. As the air grew chilly and daylight hours waned, entire villages bustled with activity. Farmers worked with urgency, knowing their very existence depended on the tasks they completed before the ground froze solid. Their first critical job was deep plowing, using strong wooden plows with iron tips pulled by teams of oxen to break up the soil before it became as hard as rock. If they waited too long to plow, the ground would become so frozen they might as well have tried ice skating on it. This early tilling helped the soil stay loose and full of nutrients throughout the winter. Manure was also an extremely valuable resource in medieval times. Farmers diligently collected every dropping from their livestock and spread it across the fields in thick layers. To this, they would add straw and fallen leaves, creating a mulch that kept the soil warmer, sometimes by as much as 10 degrees, while slowly breaking down to feed the earth. These farmers were the original recyclers, turning waste into agricultural gold, long before anyone considered going green. Water management was another crucial skill, as nothing killed crops faster than waterlogged soil that froze into a solid block. Using simple wooden spades, medieval farmers meticulously dug extensive networks of ditches, with some village drainage systems stretching for several miles. These channels skillfully guided excess water away from the fields, preventing the deadly freezing that could fatally push young plants right out of the ground. By the time the first snow fell, the fields appeared empty but were actually full of potential, waiting for spring. The careful work done in autumn made all the difference between having food and going hungry. With the land prepared, medieval farmers faced their next challenge, choosing plants tough enough to handle the freezing weather. They couldn't simply grow whatever they desired. Years of trial and error had taught them which crops could endure the harshest winters. Winter grains became the most important crops in cold regions, with rye being especially valuable because it could thrive in places too cold for other grains. This sturdy plant was like the medieval version of a polar bear, seemingly enjoying the freezing conditions. Farmers planted rye seeds in late autumn, where they would lie dormant under a blanket of snow all winter, ready to grow at the first sign of spring. The importance of rye in these cold regions cannot be overstated. Archaeological remains found in old villages reveal that more than 70% of the grain grown in northern Europe was rye, and most people consumed rye bread on a daily basis. Tough vegetables were also essential for survival. Turnips, cabbages, and onions could withstand a light frost without dying, so farmers planted them in late summer to ensure they were almost fully grown before the first hard freeze. Cabbage was particularly useful, as a single plant could provide many meals. It was the Swiss Army knife of medieval vegetables, edible when fresh cooked or fermented into sauerkraut that lasted for months. Medieval farmers also discovered that growing certain plants together helped both to survive. Beans and peas, for example, would climb up the stalks of grains as if they were natural ladders. In this perfect friendship, one plant offered support while the other shared food by putting vital nutrients back into the soil, which in turn helped the grain grow better. Another clever method involved planting short crops between taller ones. The larger plants acted as a natural shield against harsh winds, creating a warmer microclimate for the smaller, more fragile plants below. Old records indicate that this type of mixed planting could increase food harvests, by up to 25%. Even with cold, hardy plants in the ground, farmers still had to protect their crops when temperatures plummeted. They developed brilliant methods to shield plants from freezing without any modern technology, and manure hotbeds were one of their most ingenious solutions. Farmers knew that fresh animal waste naturally heats up as it decomposes. They would dig shallow trenches, fill them with fresh manure, and then add a thin layer of soil on top before planting. The decomposing waste could warm the soil by as much as 15 degrees for several weeks, keeping roots from freezing and allowing plants to grow despite the cold air. Protecting plants from the wind was another key strategy, as cold winds could easily damage crops that might otherwise survive low temperatures. To counter this, farmers created windbreaks called wattles by weaving flexible branches into sturdy fences. These barriers effectively blocked the harsh winds while still allowing precious sunlight to reach the plants. It was found that gardens sheltered by wattle fencing could produce nearly 30% more food than exposed gardens in the same area. Medieval farmers also invented early versions of greenhouses called cloches, which were bell-shaped covers made from glass or clay that were placed over individual plants to trap the sun's warmth. For larger areas, farmers built cold frames, which were essentially wooden boxes with transparent tops that protected entire rows of plants. On some farms, especially for very important crops, they constructed slanted frames covered with oiled parchment that allowed sunlight to enter while keeping the cold air out. These simple but effective structures could extend the growing season by up to 40 days in some regions. The most successful medieval gardens used a combination of all these methods, with wattle fences providing an outer defense, manure hotbeds warming from below, and cloches offering individual protection from above. Beyond creating artificial warmth, medieval farmers became experts at finding and using natural heat sources already present in their environment. They truly mastered the art of working with nature rather than fighting against it. Stone walls, for instance, served as more than just boundaries between fields. Clever farmers planted their most delicate crops along south-facing stone walls, which would absorb sunlight during the day and slowly release the stored heat at night. This created a microclimate that was several degrees warmer, turning these walls into free heating systems that also kept out wild animals. Field placement was also carefully planned according to the sun's path. In northern regions, south-facing slopes could receive up to 40% more sunlight than flat ground, resulting in warmer soil and superior growing conditions. Medieval farmers would reserve these prime locations for their most important or vulnerable crops. Written records from monastery gardens show that herbs planted on these sunny slopes matured up to 2 weeks earlier than those in less favorable positions. Perhaps the most creative use of natural heat came from strategically placing gardens near livestock pens as the animals were walking furnaces. The collective body heat from animals could actually warm the surrounding air enough to make a significant difference for nearby plants. A large barn containing 20 cows could raise the temperature in adjacent areas by as much as 4 degrees on cold nights, a small variance that could save an entire crop from a killing frost. Some innovative communities even built their living quarters and animal shelters on the north side of garden plots, creating a windbreak while allowing the heat from daily activities to benefit their food production. In some cases, smoke vents from cooking fires were even directed to flow under raised growing beds before exiting. After ensuring their crops were warm, farmers needed to preserve seeds and plant materials to begin growing again when winter ended. Their storage methods, developed without any modern technology, worked surprisingly well. Seeds were a farmer's most valuable possession, for without them, the next year's crops would not exist. The first step was proper drying. After harvest, farmers would spread seeds on cloth in warm, sunny places until they were completely dry, knowing that any moisture would cause them to rot or sprout prematurely. Once dried, seeds were stored in clay pots, which kept out mice and insects, while allowing just enough air circulation to prevent mold. Many seeds kept best in cool temperatures, just above freezing, and underground cellars or rooms dug into hillsides provided these conditions naturally. Some of these medieval storage rooms could maintain a temperature that varied by only 5 degrees all year, an impressive feat without modern thermostats. Root vegetables intended for replanting required different care. Carrots, turnips, and other roots were packed in slightly damp sand inside wooden barrels or stone-lined pits dug below the frost line. This method prevented them from drying out while also stopping rot. Small herbs often received special treatment, with many being potted and brought inside homes or monasteries to survive until spring. Winter's cold might seem like an enemy to growing food, but medieval farmers found surprising ways to make snow and ice work for them, turning winter problems into farming solutions. A thick layer of snow acted as a natural insulating blanket for planted fields, protecting dormant plants from the much colder air above. During the worst cold snaps, the temperature under the snow could be up to 30 degrees warmer than the exposed air. Winter wheat and rye particularly benefited from this protection, and fields that remained snow-covered often produced 20% more grain than those left exposed to freezing air. Clever water management using ice became another useful strategy. Farmers would sometimes create shallow pools in autumn that would freeze solid during the winter. As these large ice sheets slowly melted in early spring, they provided a steady supply of water to nearby fields exactly when young plants needed it most. This technique was invaluable in areas that often faced dry spells in the spring. Furthermore, the cycle of freezing and thawing helped to improve difficult soil. Heavy clay soils, which were almost impossible to work when wet, became much more manageable after winter frosts naturally broke the large clumps into smaller, more workable pieces. After successfully growing their crops, medieval farmers needed perfect timing for the harvest. Picking at the right moment meant the difference between full storehouses and empty bellies during the long winter. Staggered harvesting became their winning strategy, as they picked crops in carefully planned stages rather than gathering everything at once. Late-season root crops like turnips and parsnips received special treatment, remaining in the ground until just before a hard frost. The cool soil actually improved their flavor and storage life, with vegetables harvested at this time lasting up to 30% longer in storage and providing fresh food well into winter. Medieval farmers also learned to turn frost into a flavor enhancer. Certain crops, particularly kale and some types of cabbage, taste sweeter after experiencing a light frost. The cold temperature triggers these plants to convert starches into sugars, improving both their taste and nutritional value. Monastery records even suggest that kale harvested after 3 frosts contained up to 40% more vitamin C than greens harvested in the summer. Timing these harvests required impressive weather knowledge, and communities developed prediction methods based on natural signs, from cloud patterns and animal behavior to the thickness of onion skins. Even during the freezing winter months, medieval farmers managed to produce fresh greens. Monasteries led the way, using their stone buildings to create protected growing spaces. Many monastery kitchens maintain small herb gardens in south-facing windows, where plants like thyme, parsley, and chives could grow year-round, providing vital vitamin C when scurvy was a constant threat. Outdoors, heated compost gardens created warm microclimates. The significant heat generated by large decomposing piles of fresh manure and plant waste allowed cold-tolerant greens like young kale to grow slowly even during cold periods. When other methods failed, sprouting grains indoors provided another reliable source of fresh winter greens. Wheat, barley, and rye could be sprouted in any container with minimal light, offering considerable nutritional benefits. These sprouted grains contain up to 40% more nutrients than their unsprouted counterparts and can be ready to eat in just 5 to 7 days. This quick-growing food source helped bridge the nutritional gap when other fresh foods became unavailable. Some communities also built special growing chambers partially underground, where the Earth's natural warmth provided some protection from freezing temperatures. Throughout the year, medieval farmers faced the challenge of keeping their soil healthy through freezing winters without modern tools. Their clever soil management techniques made the difference between feast and famine. When spring finally arrived, rotating their fields was a primary strategy for maintaining soil strength. They typically split their farmland into 3 large fields, using each one differently each year. One field would be for winter grains, a second for spring crops, and the third would be left empty or fallow. This resting period allowed the soil in the fallow field a full year to recover and rebuild its strength and nutrients. Adding natural fertilizers was also essential for keeping the soil rich. Wood ash from cooking fires, which contained valuable minerals, was collected and spread on the fields. Crushed animal bones mixed into the soil added important nutrients that helped plants develop stronger roots, which was crucial for surviving the harsh winter. Farmers also used cover crops to protect bare soil after a harvest. Fast-growing plants like clover were sown immediately, which not only prevented precious topsoil from washing away in storms, but also captured nitrogen from the air, enriching the soil for the next season's crops. In many cold regions, a special technique known as marling was employed. Farmers would dig up chalky clay from deep underground and spread it on their fields to help balance out acidic soil. This practice was so valuable that the right to dig for marl was often written into farm agreements. After the harvest, sheep and cattle became 4-legged fertilizer spreaders. Farmers would let their animals graze on leftover plants in the fields, and the soil would receive a fresh, evenly distributed layer of manure. When the last frost finally melted away, these well-cared-for fields were rich and ready for seeds, ending the long cycle of winter protection and beginning the hopeful work of spring planting.